National Nutrition Natural Health Reviews. 3 minutes of the latest naturopathic info with Canada's leading nutrition experts. Watch, learn, and get healthy naturally.
Hey there, Jonathan Beatty, naturopathic doctor and a health expert here at Nationalnutrition.ca. Do you ever get excruciating pain in your stomach, often accompanied by nausea and vomiting? Do you ever have, especially if that pain comes on when you eat? That could be a sign of having something called a gastric ulcer. Essentially, a gastric ulcer is when there's an erosion of the normal lining of the stomach. Basically, you have a big open wound in your stomach. The stomach acid gets into it, creates a lot of irritation, a lot of pain, and it can even get infected, creating even more serious problems. Ulcers are serious business. You can end up bleeding into your stomach, and this can come out as very, dark, granular vomit, or even sort of coffee ground-like bowel movements. That means you have internal bleeding. If you do see these symptoms, you should go to your ER and get evaluated by a doctor immediately to see how severe the bleeding is. Doesn't always mean it's necessarily life-threatening, but it could be, so it's therefore important that you do get evaluated. Now, easiest way to manage ulcers is through our diet. Typically, they're triggered by our diet and often made worse by things in our diet that do stimulate stomach acid production. So if you have a stomach ulcer, normally I'm a big proponent of supplementing and supporting the acids in our stomach. This is the one exception to the rule for me. What we want to do is actually eat a lot of foods that are very soothing, things that will help heal and allow that ulcer to heal over time, things that won't stimulate stomach acid, things that won't stimulate the ulcer and cause it to become even worse. So if you do have an ulcer, some of the stuff I recommend is eating a lot of fruits and vegetables, but typically those that have been either baked or cooked so that they're easier to digest, and especially when things like leafy greens, they're very good for you, but they can be a bit of what we call a mechanical irritant. All that roughage, basically, if you were to rub a head of lettuce against your arm, it doesn't really hurt. However, if you did have an open wound there, that might be quite uncomfortable. Sometimes for leafy green vegetables or the more fibrous vegetables, it's important that you cook them down first to make them more tolerable. One of my favorite dishes people can have when they do have an ulcer is something called congee. It's very easy to make. It's a rice dish. Instead of doing the typical 2-to-1 ratio of water to rice, you would cook the rice much, much longer and use a ratio of 9-to-1. So it's 9 cups of water for every cup of rice you're making. Cook it right down and it becomes a very soothing rice porridge, very easy to digest and very unlikely to irritate your ulcer, and that can be very nourishing, something that you can actually tolerate and it will help heal your ulcer. Now, if you do have an ulcer, there's a few natural products that you can take that will actually help them to heal faster. One of my favorite is licorice, but specifically a type of licorice called DGL, or deglycyrrhizinated licorice. Licorice contains a chemical within it called glycyrrhizinic acid that can actually increase your blood pressure if you take too much. Therefore, if it's important when you're treating an ulcer to use a licorice that has had this compound removed. So that's why we call it DGL, or deglycyrrhizinated licorice. It means the glycyrrhizinic acid has been removed from it. Therefore, you can use large amounts of licorice very safely, and the licorice actually goes in, coats the ulcer, helps it to heal much faster. If you don't like licorice, in lieu of that, you could use something called Mastic Gum. It's traditionally called Mastica Chios, and this type of gum can actually go in and again, helps heal an ulcer. Other ulcer treatments that I often recommend to patients, Aloe Vera Gel. Again, same reason you might have aloe in your kitchen is for burns. It helps to soothe and heal irritated tissues. So if you have your ulcer in your gut, an easy way to help heal it is by adding in some aloe vera gel, and typically a commercial preparation, because aloe has a very potent laxative in it. And so most of the commercial preparations have that laxative called aloin removed from it, so it doesn't have that extreme laxative effect, because there's nothing worse than having an ulcer, having a lot of stomach pain, having some nausea and vomiting, and then of course you add a ton of aloe to it, and now you can just add diarrhea to the mix. That's why it's important to get a commercial preparation where the aloin has been removed. The other item I often recommend to my patients that have an ulcer is something called slippery elm, or Ulmus fulva is the Latin name of it. We actually use a powder of the inner bark, and it's a very strong, what we call mucilage. So it basically forms a mucus-like coating, which can actually coat the ulcer, allowing it a reprieve from the harmful stomach acids, and this speeds up the healing of the ulcer. So slippery elm is something I often add, very well tolerated, really helps ease the pain, really helps to ease the nausea and vomiting. And then of course, other things to ensure adequate healing. Probiotics always help to speed the healing of the gastrointestinal tissue, especially in ulcers. And then something else called L-Glutamine, which is used as fuel by the cells that line the intestinal tract or line the gastrointestinal tract. So those cells that line the stomach, it just speeds up their healing. So in summary, eliminate the foods that harm you, things that can be too stimulating to an ulcer. Caffeine often is problematic. Spicy foods are often problematic. Anything that's too rough or has too much fiber can be problematic. So intaking lots of steamed and cooked vegetables. Congee is a great option. And then of course you've got some of your herbs, your slippery elm, you've got your aloe, you've got your licorice. All of these things can help speed up the healing of that ulcer. And of course, adding in some probiotics and some glutamine on top of that, just to ensure speedy healing and fast relief from a lot of your ulcer symptoms. So if you suffer from an ulcer, I hope you've learned something today. If you know somebody who suffers from them, please share this video with them, help a friend out. And if you like this video, please check out more of our natural health videos, subscribe. If you have any questions or comments, please post them below. And remember, knowledge is health.